Yeah, so basically, look at it from a physical problem, that kind of a perspective. When do you know you have to go to the doctor, right? When there's something that's not normal. So, for example, if you dislocate your shoulder, it's not normal. That pain isn't normal. The fact that you can't move your joints around, that's not normal. Not, it's not something that is in our daily life. So, the same way with, for example, let's take depression, the fact that you're in bed the entire day and you're not motivated to even brush your teeth, that's not normal. There's obviously something wrong and that needs to be checked out. So it's like with any other medical problem that, like you said, yes, there is a tipping point, but then you see it in like not just one but many spheres of your life. So it's like social, your occupational life, your family life, your personal life. It reflects on all of these things. And that's when you know that, okay, there are chances I need help. There's something wrong that's going on. This isn't the way I function usually. And that's when I think a person really gets that realization or that acknowledgement that, okay, I do need some help. I need to seek a professional.
Exactly. There are very subtle changes that occur in our day-to-day lives, and you need to. It's a thing that we choose to ignore a lot of times because they are so subtle. But we have to be aware of them to be mentally healthy.
What should one look for? That's a good question. Well, first and foremost, obviously, look at the qualifications. Let's keep everything aside. Let's look at the qualifications. If the person is not qualified to give therapy, if the person has done like a 2-month course in counseling, but has absolutely no background of psychology otherwise, then yeah, then obviously that's like a no. That's a big no. Besides that, besides the qualifications, also check also whether you gel with the person, because what happens is that
Right.
each therapist, it's not like a therapist is going to be like a one fit fits all kind of thing. It's not like a free size sort of thing. People also differ, like even therapists have their individual differences. I'll give you like a classic example between me and Monali. So our approach to therapy is similar, but then it differs in a lot of ways. For example, I'm quite confrontational when it comes to therapy. I'm quite like, evidence based, practical strategies based and stuff. And then when it comes to Monali, of course, she uses these strategies and stuff. But the thing is that she is able to go more towards like mindfulness or a little bit towards spirituality, a little bit towards Buddhist psychology, which is not something that I wouldn't say I believe in. Of course, I believe in it. It's just that I don't like using those techniques so much in my therapy. So that's why, like, it depends. Like, if a person is more from a spiritual background, then they're not going to gel with me as much as they will gel with Monali. So that's like you need to see who is the right fit for you and your personality.
Exactly. It's both. It's actually a two-way process. I mean, when you are coming for therapy, it's not just the client who brings himself at the table. It's all himself or herself at the table, but it's also the therapist. There is a contribution that comes from a therapist's side, and as Neha said, the personality of the therapist also plays a role somewhere. Even the background plays a role, and whichever one, again, the one with whom you can easily build a rapport is the correct therapist for you. Woman has experienced gender disadvantages. So being a woman and being mentally ill acts like a dual curse for her, right? So that is one reason why seeking treatment for mental illness is very difficult for women, because there's one reason is she internalizes and stigmatizes herself for it, as Neha mentioned, right? And she wants, already she is the the weak gender of the two. Then what she really has to try not to let people see that, so she doesn't talk about it, she doesn't open up about her mental illness issues, because she cannot look weak and she cannot let other people think of herself as any less because of such reasons. And that is one of the reasons why it is very difficult for a woman to walk up to a therapist and be like, I am feeling weak, because it is going to be associated with her gender rather than her experience. It will be discouraged, or it will not be given any kind of seriousness, as in like the illness, the whole complaints that a woman would have. It What constitutes as an illness is also gender biased. So when a woman complains about something, it's not taken seriously. At the same time, when a man would probably complain about some certain things, it will be taken very seriously, right? So if she is feeling low or something, people will be like, okay, go have a coffee, you will be fine. But then when a man says that he's feeling low or there's something like that, again, there will be like a million questions. Are you experiencing something? Is there something going on in your work? Is there a lot of work stress? All these questions come in play. But for a woman, it's like, no, it's fine. So these are for some factors that do play, where because of which women do not approach mental health.
Exactly. Also, we need to realize that education in our country, females are not as educated as the males are. We know about a lot of females, especially in the rural areas, who are forced to leave education after they hit puberty. So we talk about education being a power tool a lot, because education does empower you. It does. For example, the fact that we are having this webinar right now and we're talking about what are the hindrances that women face, or what are the different like the gender differences in disorders. All of this, it is education. You're going to take from it, and you're going to use it, or you're going to help someone else use this information in some way, right? So education plays a huge factor in this, and unfortunately, women are not that educated as compared to the men. And then we talk about the educated women also. Like, for example, we are educated, we are financially independent, but even if those that are financially independent, they fear to cross those social lines that Monali mentioned. Because what will people think? Already, probably people are talking about them because they are, mothers, and they're still working, so they're not giving that much importance to their children. All these kinds of comments, mother blaming, basically, that always happens. So that woman might not want to add more to those complaints. She probably wouldn't want to show herself as like the weaker parent at all, or like the bad mother. So that's also one thing. Then over that, obviously, because of all this, the woman it becomes an even more serious issue, because things like the services are either not sought, or they're sought after late. So that's one thing. And then let's talk about sexual abuse. So this is something that we have also come across, and this is very sad. We've had patients like this. We were working in a general hospital. So what happens is that a lot of these mentally ill women, they are, first of all, they are either socially ostracized, like they are married off, because it's like a responsibility of the parents that they have to get that woman married off, they have to get their daughter married off and all. So she gets married off, she goes to her husband's house, and we know that she has a problem. Like, for example, she might have an intellectual disability, and yet she's married off. She's expected to fulfill the role of a wife. But for example, if that woman has an intellectual disability, and her mental age is still at maybe 10 or 13, do you really expect her to be able to fulfill that role? Will she be able to go and cook for the entire family? Will she be able to have sexual relations? No, because she hasn't matured that much. That's the problem. Then what happens is, that's where I come to my point of sexual abuse. These women are sexually abused many, many times. And the problem is that since they have these cognitive deficits, they don't understand that they're being sexually abused. And then being sexually abused, rape, all these things, they're a stigma in itself. No one wants to talk about these things. No one wants to go out in public and say this happened to a female of our family. So that turns into another cycle. Then because of the sexual abuse, there's PTSD, there's trauma, there's all these kinds of different issues that stem up along with the cognitive deficits that are already present. So it just becomes a cycle. And that's how that cycle needs to be broken somewhere. So, yeah.